What happens when your grief is fed back to you through an algorithm that knows your darkest impulses? On today's show, I'm joined by Alex Gonzalez, a Brooklyn-based horror author and screenwriter whose debut novel, Rekt, drags readers into the hellscape of the dark web to explore toxic masculinity, addiction, and the way the internet can quietly hollow a person out. This is the Dark Mind Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider supporting it by subscribing to my Patreon for The Voice of Midgard, where you'll have access to audio narrative horror stories produced and narrated by me, Vincent Midgard. You can also support the show for free by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support helps keep the dark conversation alive. So without further ado, I give you Alex Gonzalez. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here. This is great.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. Thank you for joining me on this 30th day of November 2025. I came across your work on Bookstagram, and as a fan of cyberpunk, which I know is not what this book is, but a fan of cyberpunk and tech dystopia, I find nothing more dystopian than the dark web and its literal seedy underbelly. Rekt isn't just transgressive tech horror, it's deeply psychological. Much like social media blurs reality into kind of hyper-reality, the almighty algorithm in your novel seems hell-bent on unraveling the protagonist. It was a hell of a story, so thank you so much for joining me today to discuss your incredible work.
Oh yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I also love cyberpunk novels. I do very much, and I think in my heart of hearts, I was trying really hard to write a cyberpunk.
Oh, really?
But I just couldn't. They're hard. They're really tough to do. I don't think I was doing it justice. One of my favorite books of all time is Neuromancer, and I love Gibson. I really thought, in my head at least, that it had the structure of a cyberpunk, in the sense that, he was like hacker, degenerate coded, and he meets a girl that kind of kicks him into gear type beat. But I know fully well that it has not reached complete cyberpunk language, but I do think it walks in that cyberpunk, cyberpunk by way of like splatterpunk.
Yeah. I can't even remember on the synopsis. What is it listed as?
I think it's tech thriller.
Tech thriller. Okay.
Yes, I believe so. Which is fine.
I would say transgressive tech horror, because it's really dark.
Yes.
And it's tech related, but as it goes with cyberpunk, there's not like this super emphasis on the techno-capitalist singularity just kind of enslaving everyone.
Yeah, that's a strong point. I do think, to the bigger point, that people have had a hard time kind of labeling what the book is, myself included. Whether it's a tech thriller, I know in some bookshelves I find it in like the gore splatterpunk area. Sometimes I find it in the psychological area. Sometimes I find it just like not even in the horror section at all, but in sci-fi, which I think has gotten me in the most hot water because sci-fi fans are pretty brutal. But no matter what, they've had fun with labeling it in any way they could. But that is a good point though for cyberpunk. I do think that most cyberpunk has obviously like a corporal, big capitalism, big tech as the enemy, which totally tracks. And I think that might not be there in Rekt, as much as it is, tech overlords in terms of like bitcoins and dark web creeps. But I do agree it doesn't have that suit and tie, corpo, Wayland Utani type beat.
Yeah. Well, for those that haven't read the book, a brief synopsis. It's about a man named Sammy Dominguez, a young man spiraling into grief after the sudden death of his girlfriend, Ellery. Desperate for distraction, Sammy turns to shock videos and the dark web, only to be led to a mysterious site called Chinsky, which seems to anticipate his darkest impulses. As he compulsively watches footage of Ellery's death and countless other tragedies, the line between reality and algorithmic manipulation blurs, dragging Sammy deeper into a digital abyss, and that is where the story really takes off. So, you mentioned your love of cyberpunk and an aim in making it a cyberpunk novel. What made you choose the dark web as the setting for exploring grief rather than a more traditional haunted space or like a psychological drama?
Yeah, I was at this conference not so long ago, and we talked about grief, and I had never really been asked it quite straight up. I think my answer is actually more pragmatic than one might think, and I hope it doesn't take away the romance of the emotion. But I think with grief, considering how everyone experiences it, and everyone has really highly personal experiences with grief, um, it gives the character a lot of leash, right? Like it's such an intense emotion that you can really see someone doing damn near anything out of grief. And because it's so personal, readers can half relate with it, half not relate with it, but kind of understand like what this person's going through because we've all experienced it. In terms of the dark web, I had to be very like I knew I wanted it to be about the dark web because I've always been terrified of the dark web and it freaks me out still. I know that the internet in general and like social media and the algorithms, like they know every single thing we do. They know all the things we talk about and think about and all of like the things we Google and look up. And so I thought if there was anything that like could sink its claws into someone who's vulnerable, it would be the dark web. And the most vulnerable thing would be grief. But also on a pragmatic level, I kind of had to treat the dark web as something without confines. Like a haunted house or however it could be would have like literal boundaries and like property limits and like actual structure. But because the dark web is so mysterious and because it's very nebulous, at least to the people not familiar with it, um, it could kind of operate as like an endless grab bag of horror, right? It was the equivalent of having like just an open portal to hell in this guy's pocket or on his laptop, which I felt was increasingly important for his story, right? It couldn't be something he could literally run away from. It had to be something he was like shackled to and kind of virtually uploaded to this, even without him wanting to be, even though he did kind of want to be. All very pragmatic, but it worked nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a browser that I think was like the equivalent to the Tor browser or Tails in your book.
Yes, I think it's called Spyglass. Yeah.
Spyglass, yeah. Was that inspired by like the Tor or the Tails browser?
Yeah, totally. I had to find, I actually don't do dark web things. I learned a lot about it and I did a lot of research on it, but I had to make sure that, you can't go, whenever you do research for these types of things, you can't really go one to one because you're going to back yourself into a corner. But it
What do
was
you mean
really
by one to one?
like if I had made it based off Tor, then I would be playing to the realistic limits of like what Tor does, what it
Oh,
allows, how you
gotcha.
use it. And narratively, that's always a pain. But Spyglass, in my research of like finding these browsers, I found all these fun forums that were talking about different browsers for the dark web and how each one kind of has pros and cons, right? Like some have very, very bad security, but have more access to stuff. Some have super duper high security and are always getting patrolled by like the FBI or whatever the hell. But you have theoretically, you can't really go a lot of places. Some are just like hotbeds of viruses. Some are not even running anymore. Some are janky. Some are pretty nicely funded, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, well, what would be the one that's obscure enough and dangerous enough that like someone like Sammy would be like, like a hop, skip, and a jump from Tor. Let's see how it goes. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. From the sounds of it, it's not something that I'm interested in viewing, but I hear that you don't even really need to go on the dark web. There's stuff on platforms like X that's basically
Oh
as
yeah.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, it has totally breached into surface internet. I mean, all of the stuff that I was like kind of referencing and quoting, I didn't even need the dark web to see. We used to have, I don't know how much you were on back in the day, but like in the early 2000s, there was a lot of gore
Rotten,
sites. Right,
rotten.com.
Rotten, Ogreish, the YNC was one I was familiar with. World Star isn't that bad, but every now and then you'll stumble on a World Star. Live Leak is super popular,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and all of these, and like you don't even need the dark web to do that. And so that was even more fun. Was like the dark web was only to add like a bigger layer of anonymity to the website, right? Like, 'cause you could track down, in theory, you could track down, the masthead of YNC, find out who does it. The guy who did Rotten, the Canadian gentleman, I think he went to jail and he got released from jail and all of that stuff. So, but if it was the dark web, if it was a little bit more removed, you could up the danger of it and like decrease how you track the trackability of it. Um, which also got me into hot water with like a lot of copywriters and editors and like sci-fi people that were like, this is impossible. And I was like, go away.
In my world, it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't need to hear that right now.
Well, in the novel, the site Chinsky feels like it's exploiting Sammy's vulnerabilities. Do you think the internet is inherently predatory, or is it just a mirror?
I think it's predatory, 100%. I think we were sold that it was a mirror. I think we were told that, all these jerks were always like, oh, the algorithm is just what you like. And it's like, shut up. Like it wants to compartmentalize you as much as it can, back you into a corner, and then like only force feed and sell you one thing. I think what it does is people are nuanced. A lot of people have dimensionality and different opinions and different takes, and oftentimes, the quote is like contain multitudes, and they're self contradict, and they blah blah blah, and they have all these different opinions. The internet doesn't care about any of that type of stuff. They wants to find the version of you that is the most profitable, the version of you that has the hottest data points, and it wants to kind of trap you as that and like constantly give you engagement that's you're either going to get a dopamine rush from agreeing with, or you're going to get a dopamine rush from being enraged by. Like that's what it does. I think people like to assume it's a mirror, but no, I think that lets off when you think about like the geniuses that designed these pieces, these like addictive data harvesting algorithm AI tech overlord people, they have no interest in making a mirror for you. They want to use you and like prey on you. And I think I think people are now coming to terms with that. And obviously, anytime I talk about this book, I'm really careful to be like, look, I'm not some preacher cautionary tale guy that like I'm on Instagram, I'm online, like I'm very, very much online, which I think is why I'm like, I feel comfortable screaming about it because I'm like in the trenches of it. I'm not like wagging my finger being like kids these days. I am one of the kids these days that's dying in its claws.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a bad neighborhood. I mean, one of the things I recently did was trademarked the Dark Mind podcast, and it says on the USPTO.gov website, when you do this, you are going to get all kinds of scams. And I didn't really read it, but I've been getting this stuff in the mail. Like, I mean, it's real slick how they do it, because all they do is just search the site and see who's recently applied for trademarks. And, like you've got to be careful if somebody that coming from their account sends you something like, check out this link. You click on that. The next thing you know, your account's been hijacked and they're selling crypto, you know? It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah.
it's bad. There's no. I think now everyone's like keyed into that. I think being online and obviously, it's no secret that it is a necessary evil, right? Like people need it. People make a living off of it. People either need it as a hustle, as a passion, as their full career, as a job. So we need it to stay connected and to do things. But I think that makes it all the much worse is like, oh my gosh, you have to like consistently just kind of engage with this like hydra that's like out to get you.
Well, what do you think audiences miss when they focus only on the shock elements of the story rather than its emotional core?
You know, that's hard to say, right? I don't know. There is a part of me that is like, there's a part of me that thinks that if you engage with it only on the shock factor and you like close the book and you're like, oh, that was like trash, that was splatter garbage, that's almost kind of a benefit to the story, I think, in a weird way, because then like this character of Sammy like isn't heard, isn't listened, and that's very on brand for his arc. Does that make sense? Like,
Hmm.
I think we have a lot of people, and I always get in hot water whenever I talk about like these like incel type of guys. My wife hates it when I talk about this stuff, but I think when people kind of dismiss the book as like splatter trash, they're dismissing a young man who's in pain, and that's kind of what the book is about this young man who cannot connect with anybody, and the only thing he can connect with is this miserable splatter trash. So in a strange way, I don't want to go so far as to say it's like proving the book's point, but I do think it's its own weird engagement with the subject matter of like, oh, this is garbage, I don't want to be a part of it. Like you have successfully engaged with Sammy, and even in dismissing him, you've engaged with him, which I think I like a lot. And obviously, you have the people that read through the lines and they really connect to Sammy on a profounder level, and that's obviously, the best case scenario, right? You wade through the splatter and you see this guy hurting and you see this guy like going through this grief and evolving and trying really hard to be a better person. And then when the reader can engage with that guy, that's better. But hey, I have no problem with like a book that's just kind of trying to get your pulse up and like show you gore and violence and shoot them up. Like that's also fun. That's fine. It's not a big, I really clutch my pearls about it.
Well, so the site Chinsky doesn't just host violent clips. It seems to anticipate what Sammy wants to see, almost like a private conversation between his worst impulses and the algorithm. How did you think about that, quote, dialogue when you were building his descent?
Right. Well, it always had to be like, it's funny. The original conceit of this story was actually not was coming around before AI was like in our faces all the time, and it was actually about Spotify of all things, which I thought was really funny because it was like it kept suggesting to me songs it would thought I'd like. Right, like you like this artist, you'll like this artist, and then as you go down, you kind of get more and more of the same artist, but then it kind of loops back into itself and it shows the same person over and over again, or the deeper cut of the same person over and over again. And so when I kind of taped that over Sammy, it had to always be something he would like, but something like 5% worse. Right? It had to be desensitizing him as he went on. So like, yeah, you like this content, you'll like this content. And he does, and he clicks it and he watches it. And then, you've seen these two videos, so surely you're going to watch this third video. It's only a little bit worse. And in terms of subject matter, by the way, it's all the same, right? It's about beheading, is a shooting, is a lynching, is a burning. It's who it happens to and how close it happens, and those intimate details of where it happens. Does it happen in his bathroom? Does it happen in his apartment? Are there details of like a high school uniform or something like that? And those things kind of have to claw you in more and more and more. So the dialogue again had to be like, it can't be fully, oh, this is what I want to see. It's always got to be like the internet saying, this is what you want to see, and we're going to show it to you, and you're going to like it. And then it's kind of like, it's always that like baby bird feeding mentality. You know what I mean? Kind of like
Mhm.
regurgitating into his little mouth.
Well, how does that kind of tie into the way, it started off as he was a teenager. He got to see the grimy underbelly, so to say. So what interested you about that idea of early exposure lying dormant for years before flaring back up in a new, more dangerous form?
Yeah. Well, I knew even if I didn't end up writing a book, even if the book, I'll put it this way, even if the Chinsky website, even if it didn't exist in his story at all, I think it's important to understand that there are people like Sammy that, like me, that kind of grew up watching that stuff when they weren't supposed to be, stumbled upon seeing it. And that kind of colored your relationship with death at a really, really young age, right? I remember watching these videos as a kid at a sleepover just because 4chan was a new website that no one knew what it was. And then you click on a couple links that you have no idea what it is. And then, because the videos were never titled beheading, they were titled something obscure, right? And you click it and you see like an ISIS beheading, or at the time, I guess it was like a Taliban or whoever. But I think what was important to understand is that for Sammy to see that at a really young age, lying dormant might not be the right phrase, but it colored his relationship with death. It was like, I've seen someone die, I've seen someone get their head blown away, but I saw it on a computer screen and it was removed from me. But I know it's real and I know it happened. And then when it happens to his uncle and when it happens to Ellery, and it's kind of like it's coming closer and closer and closer, it was more like him jumping back into creepypastas and jumping back into these gore videos was almost a way to like put it back in the box, kind of, right? To like I need to keep watching all of these things and keep it where I know it's safe, which is behind my screen. But then obviously, the Chinsky website kind of reaches through the screen, so to speak, and kind of grabs him for it. But I think that's important when you have a character, especially if you're writing about the internet. Like, the internet has evolved so much so fast and will keep evolving so fast that, like, I'm 31 now, and I know kids born 10 years after me or 10 years before me or whatever all have different pivotal coming of age moments on the internet that color entirely how they engage with the internet, which is maybe why I have like a naturally kind of anxious persona around the internet, because my first my first encounter with it was just death videos, and that's kind of colored my whole life with it.
Yeah. Yeah, to kind of date myself, you said you're 31. I'm actually 45. So I remember hearing about 4chan, I think in like 2017. Does that sound
Sure.
about right?
Yeah, that sounds about. I mean, it's been around for a bit, but that sounds about right.
Well, at least when all the crazy stuff
Hmm.
yeah.
Oh, the QAnons. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. That was his big moment, but it had been around for a while.
Yeah, so back when I was a teenager in the 90s, there was actually this thing floating around on VHS called Faces of Death. Did you ever hear
Sure.
about that?
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I'm very much aware of Faces of Death.
Yeah, like I think I just saw it like this. They actually show an electrocution execution.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. These were pretty intense.
Yeah, well, it's funny, right? Because I was talking to someone about Faces of Death, and I still had Blockbuster back in the day. I
Oh,
was
I
on the
remember
tail end of
Blockbuster.
Blockbuster. And I remember I would have some friends come to my house, but we would go to the movie store, and we would get like a, Serbian film, or like
Oh,
right.
I
Or
own, well, I won't say that. I own the uncensored version.
okay.
I
Right.
love extreme cinema.
Great. So that Serbian film, Cannibal Holocaust, those August Underground films, those toe tag pictures. Those are all like super snuffy adjacent, right? Like, they're fake, but they're like extreme. However, I think the distinction has to be made that like there was agency in going to get that. It was like, friends, come over. I'm going to watch this video that I rented and I read about it and I know what it's about. And I do think that there's a big distinction between that and like someone sending you a link you don't know, and then you click it, and then suddenly it's a video of like a torture. And I think the getting caught off guard is half of it. But obviously, as Sammy progresses downward, he starts looking for it, right? He starts looking for the faces of death. He starts looking for the blue links he hasn't clicked yet. But I think it's that. I also think it has something to do with it being like on your personal laptop that you work with, that you like the same browser you use to like message or to email your grandma. You're gonna open up another tab to like watch someone die, and that to
Yeah.
me, I think, is really a scary idea.
Yeah. Well, Rekt has been praised as, quote, bone deep unsettling and, quote, a disturbing examination of toxic masculinity and the darkest pits of the internet. When you hear those descriptions, what core question do you feel the book is actually asking underneath the marketing language? And as far as toxic masculinity, what aspects of that is it addressing?
Yeah, that's great. I think for the first part of the question, underneath all the marketing language, I think it should ask people if they trust the internet, if they trust online, if they trust their apps, if they are really confident that the data and the persona that is being like harvested by these machines, if they actually believe it's like good and philanthropic and like has a net positive, which I obviously don't think it does. I think it's evil and miserable. So underneath all of that, I want them to like second guess their relationship with any social media, any online at all. In terms of the second one for toxic masculinity, I have read reviews of the book, and there are some people that are like, this is not actually about toxic masculinity. It doesn't really examine toxic masculinity in that way. And I don't really know what to say to that because I feel like it does. I think what specifically does it do? I had to be really honest with like there's a good stretch in the book where Sammy's just like terrorizing women, right? He's fully he's like he's given up on trying to solve it and just wants to spread it and share it and wield it like a weapon. And I think that to me is the that part of the book of like I had to be really honest with what a guy who maybe he feels entitled to a better life, or at least feels betrayed that his life has gone the way it has. I think he just wants to hurt people and be heard and have an effect on someone. And obviously it's for the negative and it ends very sourly and it's gross. But I think when people hear that it's about toxic masculinity, they're going to expect like I'm gonna have some answers as to how to help our fallen brethren, or like how we could like therapy it out and all that stuff. But I don't really have any interest in that. Like, I don't have those answers. Like, I'm not, a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I don't have the advice to help somebody. I just want to express like the screaming that I've heard from people, or I have felt myself sometimes, and I think and also for what it's worth, toxic masculinity, the phrase is everywhere now. Everyone uses it on everything, and I don't really know what it means anymore. Like masculinity is such a spectrum, and toxic is so subjective, and I don't really know how it goes. I don't think Sammy is trapped in his masculinity, so to speak. I just think he's using it as an angry man, and I think that there is a nuance there. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what people want from me.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about people not trusting the internet, one of the most common things that I hear about now are VPNs. Like,
Sure.
it's even if you have like Verizon, part of your plan usually includes a VPN. And I can't stand using them because, like, on certain things you do, it'll make it run buggy. Or if you're trying to log into your bank will say that, they're experiencing strange activity because, there's some security issues bumping into the VPN. So I don't ever use them, but it's gotten to the point where a friend of mine, when I was online looking something up and he saw that I didn't use a VPN, he was like, "Look at you barebacking the internet."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that skeptic, that mistrust is earned. Like I think that's fair. Unfortunately, you're right. Like it's designed, it's designed to push back when you do use VPN, right? These people being like, I'm going to run buggy. I'm not going to trust the strange activity or whatever. It's like you get poo-pooed for trying to use protection.
Well, the story moves between childhood memories, present day obsession, and a future that's almost here. How did you structure time in the book to mirror the way the internet collapses past and present into an endless scroll? Or let me say an endless doom scroll.
Yeah, really. Well, that was really fun too, and I like horror a lot, and I like to think a lot about it in terms of like there's like a chronic horror and there's an acute horror, right? Like acute being like fast, boom, shock and awe. It is like a splat. It's an axe murderer in the house, and that's the whole story right there. And then they have chronic horror, which is maybe like Stephen King's It, perhaps, or some other long scope story where the horror builds incrementally, and all that stuff. And so that kind of made perfect sense, at least for me and the internet. Like the internet doesn't go away. It's not going to go away. And if you're on the internet at a young age, and you make one mistake on the internet at a young age, the ripple effects will build on top of each other older and older. Especially like you said, if it's a dormant energy, flare it up. There's a reason why he goes back to like, it's almost like he almost like regresses, right? When he's at his childhood home and then he starts going back onto his old creepypasta that he used to do as a kid. Like that couldn't have happened unless he started that as a kid, and that stuff doesn't go away and the fan base has to build slowly. So you had to like have a long scope story of it to kind of build how screwed he is. But then, like everything, when it's done and over, and not to spoil anything, but I'm sure anyone's listening to it, they probably read it or whoever. By the ending of the book, it's like all the choices you've made and everything you've done has been kind of like almost like had been predicted this whole time. Like you fell right into the algorithm's hands from decades ago, and it's all just one kind of data bit, and it happened, and it's good. It's good. It's done now, and I think that has always been like a scary part of the book for me. At least one of my fears of that book was like is everything like the question of fate and destiny, like all of these choices you make over the years, are you like going right into the hands of what people expect of you? Are you playing right into what people expect you to be? Are you not full of surprises? Is there any free will to any of this? And again, those questions can really only happen over like chronic long-term scrolling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned creepypasta, the girl that was involved in the Slender Man killings.
Yeah,
you
sure.
remember that? She made it. I don't know how long she made it when she left that group home, but that was not a good idea. She was not in prison. She was just ankle monitored in a group home, which didn't sound like it was that bad, but I'm sure she's going back to the state hospital now.
Oh yeah, I mean, I only know about the killings. Did she get like released or something, or what'd she do?
Yeah, so she was 12 years old
Right.
when it happened, and so they put her in a state mental hospital, obviously a locked hospital, but I guess she was doing well enough that they put her in a group home, kind of like a halfway house or something
Mhm.
like that. But she had an ankle monitor, and I don't know if she was allowed to leave and had to be back at
Mm.
a certain time or what. But she decided to take off with somebody. She cut the ankle monitor off and took off. I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to be long before you get
Mm.
caught.
Yeah,
I
that's.
think you're going back to the hospital.
Oh wow, yeah, those Slender killings were nuts. But it's and that's so funny, right? Like, I mean, not funny, but you know what I mean. It's like when when someone does something like that for Slender Man, it almost makes him real.
Yeah,
Like he's now real. Like he did it. This boogeyman we created, he got out there and
the
little girls
algorithm.
killed someone. Yeah, we brought him to like a tulpa. Like we brought him to life. And I think that's just gonna happen more and more. And things like that are gonna just gonna keep happening. It's like I don't know how else to explain like this stuff is real. It's real. The internet is. People like to say it's not real. Like the internet's not real, but it very much is, and it's bad, and it's not, and it's out to get us almost every time.
One of the strange things about creepypastas is the creepypasta narrators. And even if you go on the creepypasta Reddit, there's a big warning. A lot of them are grooming I think it's young girls,
Oh, how?
the narrators. Like they will get messaged by, I guess, creepypastas attract a very young crowd. And,
Oh, so if like a fan likes it, the creator's gonna like DM that
yeah,
fan.
or the fan DMs the creator and slowly gets it to the point where they're asking for nude photos or something like
Oh
that.
gosh, great.
Yeah. There's a big warning about a particular one if you go to the Reddit creepypasta, because I did narrative fiction before I started the podcast. Still like doing that, but
What's
yeah.
the one?
What's the one?
Yeah, like what's the one that's getting the big warnings?
Oh, the name of the guy?
Yeah, or the name of the story at least.
Oh no, it's not a story. It's a narrator, a particular guy. I can't remember what his handle was,
Oh no.
but yeah, if you go to the creepypasta Reddit, I mean, right there at the top, it says, we've been having issues with, narrators grooming, and then it mentions this particular person. So,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, we're so cooked.
Well, so at a thematic level, do you see Rekt as ultimately a story about the internet, or is the internet just the sharpest tool available right now to talk about older human drives like voyeurism, cruelty, and denial?
I think it has to be. I think it has to be a story about the internet. And I was little, if the subtext of the question is like, is this story dated or is this an evergreen story about like denial and male loneliness and angst and PTSD? I definitely was worried about that writing it, but I had to just be honest of like, it is a story about the internet. And while these problems had always existed, grief, PTSD, misplaced rage, and directionless trauma and the like, uh, while all of that stuff has existed, for rekt, it had to be like shaken up in the internet. And so I do firmly believe it's a story about the internet, which is that's why I firmly think like I'm okay. And I knew that going in, like it'll be dated instantly, and that's fine because it's gonna be dated and it's gonna be niche. And that's the two worst things you want for a commercially viable book, dated and niche.
Uh,
But that's fine because that had to be authentic, right? So it had to be about the internet. I had to use internet slang, internet jargon, and then talk about a subculture of internet that most people don't even know about. Um, but in doing that, I'm glad I stuck to my guns and like made it firmly about that because I think it found its people that were like, oh, this is for me. I do think if I had marketed it more as like an evergreen story of like male loneliness epidemic or whatever the hell, like I think it would have fallen in the wrong hands more often than not. But I think this way, marking it as like an internet book about the internet, it has found the right hands more often than not. Does that make sense?
yeah. Well, was there an early version of the story that leaned more towards supernatural tropes, or was it always grounded in digital realism?
Well, that kind of goes back to the dark web question. Like, I think there's that famous quote, any piece of technology that's advanced enough is indistinguishable from magic, right? And that to me was how the dark web is implemented in this book. Like, it had to be so strange and mysterious and obscure, at least from Sammy's POV, right? Because Sammy is engaging with it with all the knowledge that, I have or that we have. He's not like some tech guy. So in that regard, it fundamentally, well, it might not be paranormal. It fundamentally operates like a paranormal thing. It just kind of knows how to read his mind and give him all this stuff. Was there a version that was more supernatural? Not necessarily, but there was a version of it that was way more bizarro for sure. Like there was a version of it with the original ending that was like way like WTF, kooky, bizarro, body horror, strange, almost like more Videodrome than anything else. Um, but my editor was like, no. So I was like, fine.
Yeah, it's funny when you were saying how high level enough technology is indistinguishable from magic. It made me think about, Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. And
Yeah,
now we are
totally.
burning shit to the ground.
100%. Totally, totally, totally. It feels like that. Like we harnessed something that we should not have harnessed at all. And now now we're all just killing each other about it.
Well, some say shock sites desensitize people. Others say they reveal something we're already suppressing. What do you think is the core psychological effect for someone like Sammy?
I think it's got to be both, right? Like it's showing. I do think, look, fundamentally, I do think that there is a morbid curiosity that people have, right? They have that. They have that itch that they want to see they're the call from the void type when they like lean over a staircase or the ocean. Uh, and I do think some people just have a spectrum about it. I think people lean in a little further. They start wearing memento moris of like little skulls or bones or, gotta go full goth, Mary Shelley with the heart of her boyfriend and stuff. And then some people have a very low threshold for it. Like they feel the call to the void. They might engage with it with one or two intrusive thoughts, but then they kind of turn their head. And I think for Sammy with these shock videos, it was like, remember his uncle, he witnessed it at a young age. Then it happened right at his doorstep with his uncle. And then it happened right in his like life with his girlfriend. And I think he needed to engage with these shock videos to desensitize himself with it. Like the void was called way too early at too young of an age. And now it was all happening and he needed to like watch as much as he can. And I think that's an important aspect, especially with like binging and doom scrolling and all of that language we use now. It's like, if he could see the worst of the worst of the worst, then he will not be scared and surprised by what humans can do or by what the internet can show him, which I think is key. Which is why, there's like a really dark part in the book that gets knocked on a lot is when him and his buddy are talking about, porn and finding porn on the dark web or whatever. And then he ends up seeing that red crib on the webcam of the infant. And a lot of people are like, they close the book at that part, which I think is kind of silly. But to me, that was important because he kind of like, it's like calling your shot, right? Like when you call your shot and then you like hit the corner pocket or whatever, like he's like, I got to see this worst thing. Haha. Would you ever watch something like that? No. And then he does. That's kind of the mentality of Sammy the whole way through is like, I got to see the worst thing I can. And then he'll keep coming to the threshold and not crossing and not crossing. And then he has to do it because to him, if he can do it and engage with it, he'll be like healed in some way.
Yeah. Well, I guess you answered my next question. I was going to ask if Sammy could step back and watch his own online descent as a third party. What moment do you think would disturb him the most?
Yeah, probably that part. Or if not that part, I think it would be, if not that part, I guess it's got to be that part. If not that part, it would be him turning down Becca at the bar when she offers to take him to Portland and like have a life with him.
Uh-huh.
I think that would be his biggest like, wow, I've really like sealed my fate in that regard because there's only so many times in his life can someone like offer like not an olive branch but like a ladder, like come up, like let me help you. And I think closing the doors on all these opportunities is what really kind of sealed his fate. Yeah. But I do think Sammy would be happy to see some cool shit he does when he's like, shooting and killing and robbing. For what it's worth.
Going John Wick for a minute.
Yeah, for like one or two moments, which a lot of people got mad about too, but I thought that was fun.
Well, was writing this kind of horror cathartic for you, or did it force you to confront digital anxieties you'd rather avoid yourself?
Oh, definitely cathartic in a really big way. There's a really big personal element to the book, specifically with the uncle character. Well, one, I'm from Florida. I went to Florida State, and so that was just fun to like kind of. And I wrote it during peak pandemic times, so it was like thick of 2020 when I was writing this book. But I had thought back, and I was like, well, one, I get to like process all of like my Florida State feelings and FSU and Tampa, and just how crazy Florida is as a place. And all of the literature that comes out of Florida is very like Florida coded and Florida branded. And so I was like, well, what's a book that could take place on a campus at FSU and just feel this humid, gross heat? Um, but the cathartic part was about the uncle. I had an uncle very much like this guy who really kind of drank himself to death, killed him, just like really let his life fall apart in like a really bad, bad way. And it kind of haunted me and haunted it was like a dark cloud over my family for still to this day. And so writing this cathartic experience of Sammy engaging with his uncle, that was obviously me. I mean, it's dedicated to my uncle, Michael. And so that was me kind of grappling with this man in my life that you're like, I love this man, but he is a bastard. You know, like this guy is a bastard and he is bringing down our whole family. But I love him and I need to be with him and I need to be there for him. And so that is kind of the whole engagement. For that part, it was cathartic for sure. And for what it's worth, I think that part is the strongest part of the book is like on top of all of this splatter, gore, tech, AI stuff, there is this strong line of like, family and like not hate necessarily but like resent and spite of like and like how I think that could be the fun part of grief is when it's not like, oh, I miss them, I love them, they were perfect. It's I miss them, I love them, they made my life hell and I'm conflicted about this, you know. That I think was a great like kind of foundation for Sammy's journey.
Gotcha. Well, if you could rewrite the story from Ellery's perspective, how would the narrative change?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I have no idea. I think there's this idea that if she dies in this car crash or rewrites it from her perspective, or at least up to the point of her dying, let's call it that, I think she'd be mad at I think she'd be mad at Sammy, but I also think she'd be mad at herself. I do think. Because it takes two to tango, right? And you could only give like someone could hold you back, but it's only as much as you let them hold you back, right? And I think she would be mad at herself for like I should have gone to Chapel Hill. I should have gone to that school I got into. I should have like left this guy behind. And I do think that the nuance is there from her perspective too. Like, yes, I love Sammy. Yes, I do want to keep my relationship with him, but I can't throw it all away for him. Or why doesn't he see it from my perspective? Or how come I'm not showing it from my perspective to that extent? Now, up until she dies, of course, when all of this haunting, horrible digital stuff happens, I do think that there's a really sadistic idea of her persona living online, right? Like that when at the end of the book, when we have all these multimedia bits and comments and we see like stinky, smellery images and shit all over the place, I do think that that's a really scary thought of like, the very thing she didn't understand being the internet is what she now is like forced to live in. It's a very scary thing. But I don't want to speak on that too much.
Well, how did your experience with screenwriting shape the pacing and structure of Rekt?
Yeah, that's fun. I will say it was really tough. It was a tough balance to walk because I think for, literary fiction, literary genre, which I kind of don't like the phrase literary fiction, although it's a phrase you just kind of have to, bend over with. It's fine, whatever. A lot of people liken that to very passive observer, right? We have to be in this character's head and we have to be kind of feeling his emotions and we have to be observing the nuance of life and humanity and the human condition and all that shit. But from a screenwriting perspective, you want to see someone do something, do an action. And it's something I teach a lot to my students. It's like, I do not want them, like, you only get one opportunity to like have a character look in the mirror or to have a character like look at old photographs or whatever. Like, that's it. They have to do shit. Whether it's stealing, robbing, lying, making love, fighting, whether it's arguing or picking a fight or asking questions, these things have to happen. And so from that standpoint, I had to really kind of walk the line of like, if it's too much of just dung, 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 I don't think it would have, not to toot my own horn, but I do think the book has strong literary merit to it. And I don't think it would if it was just boom, 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 boom. But I also don't think it would be interesting in the slightest if we were just in his head the whole time. Now, funny enough, I think that is where the book again, I do be reading my reviews, which is fine. There's no sense pretending I don't. But like, I could agree to an extent of like this, to the criticism of like, it goes from very like internal monologue, navel gazing to shoot 'em up John Wick. And to me, that was fun. And that was, I thought, a breath of fresh air for the reader. Because I'm like, this guy's got to be bored to tears in this guy's fucking head. Let's please give him a gun and have him shoot things. And for some people, they were on my side of like, oh, yeah, it was like, we just like hit the brick, boom, 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 boom. And some people are like, whoa, I was really I liked being in his head and just kind of slowly unraveling. And other people were like, oh, it wasn't good until he picked up the gun. And I think that's really fun to like kind of see these different opinions. But in terms of a screenwriting perspective, like, again, also really hard to do it over a long period of time. Screenwriting, they like acute horror, especially for something high concept. They don't want a long, drawn out, chronic, slow burn. It's really tough to sell in the genre marketplace. But I had a really good time though. It was fun pacing that stuff out.
Yeah, but you say that the reader would be bored if it was all introspection. I mean, his introspection, though, he's experiencing some pretty horrific stuff related to what he's looking at online.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But, you're totally right. And I had a lot of fun with that part, too, of him watching something and then, like, processing it, right?
Yeah, processing it is terrorizing.
Yeah.
Well, your short story, Die Cuban, takes on a werewolf curse through a character already wrestling with identity and inheritance. What draws you to monsters as a way of talking about what they're born into versus what they choose?
I love Die Cuban. I think that's such a fun story. And it's one of my short stories that I'm pretty proud of. I think it's fun when you have a monster, whether it's a ghoul on the online or a creepypasta or a werewolf or something to that effect. You always got to remember like who it's happening to, especially when it comes down to like transformation of the body. Like for Die Cuban in particular, we watch a lot of werewolf things happen, and it's just a guy. It's just a cookie cutter guy. And I'm not even going to say it's like a white guy or an American guy. It's just a guy. And then that guy, yeah, he's afraid of becoming a wolf. But what is he leaving behind is the question. And yeah, it's his family, but what else? And so for Die Cuban, it was fully based off one of my good friends, Julian, who is a Cuban guy and who is very, very Cuban and very proud of being Cuban. And at the time, I was thinking of werewolves. And I was like, well, what would happen if my buddy Julian got bit? Like, what would he be most upset about? It would probably be that he got bit by a white guy and that he doesn't have the choice of like erasing his like Cuban heritage. And that to me was a really, really fun thing. And I think if you kind of like double back that onto Rekt, it's this kid kind of like confused of what he has left in his life, but already being like forced on a conveyor belt he didn't necessarily sign up for, which I think is a fun idea, right? It's like, who are you? Oh, it's too late. You're going to become this now. And I think that's a really fun kind of headspace to put a character in. Like, grieving who you're leaving behind before you're even aware of what's happening.
Yeah. Well, along with Die Cuban, you've also written the novella Landshark and have horror fiction published with presses like Madness Heart and Death's Head. Looking across those works and Rekt, what ugly question about human nature do you realize you keep coming back to, even if you don't plan to?
Yeah, I think Landshark is funny. It's not, I don't know if you read it. It's not very, let me tell the listeners now, it's not very good. It's not very good, but I do think I was hitting on something that people ended up liking in terms of, it's a lot about God and religion and stuff like that. But I think, when I look at all of the stuff I've written about, I think that I like to indulge with like hidden pleasures. I'm a big fan of Clive Barker, and like he writes a lot of stuff that's like, they're all like sexual deviance from the outside perspective, but from the inside, it's a lot of love and passion and shame and guilt and sexual hangups and, things that they don't really understand. And it's always heightened through, the Hellraiser box of this and the third thing. But for my characters, it's always been like, I remember I have one called It Only Comes When You Want It. It only comes if you want it. and that was published in a Death's Head anthology. That was that was a horror erotica anthology, which is very funny for me. It's not a particularly horny book, but it's about incubus that comes into a dorm room in Yale and like has its way with students, and it only comes if you want it. And so this girl is kind of freaking out because she's seeing all of her friends get like kind of attacked in the night, but they're all claiming to have wanted it. And it's this girl kind of freaking out of like, why don't I want this? Do I want this? And like, what does that mean to want something like this? And so that plus like rekt, when he likes to watch these videos, they make him feel a type of way. He wants to attack these girls at the club with this like digital hunting knife, with all of these things. I like this idea of showing this like horrific idea in introducing it to someone's life and then having them change their behavior off of it. It gives them a chance to like indulge deep dark secrets. It gives them a chance to be like, well, if this crazy thing is happening, I'm within my rights to act fucking nuts as well. And I think that's an important aspect. There's an author I really like. His name is Robert Charles Wilson. He wrote a book called Spin, and he wrote a book called The Chronoliths. And I really like the way he writes sci-fi, and it's always like some giant globe exploding universe concept, but how it affects like one guy specifically. And it's like, oh, like this guy's life doesn't change that much, except maybe his marriage failed now, or maybe he's running out of money because he has to spend it all on this like sci-fi element. And it's like a slowly encroaching kind of thing that affects his like mundane life. And that's what I really like about the horror I write, at least, is like, you know, yeah, you want to have your character like fight Pennywise the clown in the sewer and like take a gun to the werewolf and shoot the silver bullet and all that stuff. But at first, before you get them to that point, you have to see how it affects what they want, what they like, and if they're little freaks. And they usually are. They probably are going to be little freaks.
Mm-hmm. Well, the horror zine, You Are Not Alone, which you co-created with your brother, started as anonymous, and if I understand correctly, anonymous, self-published stories mailed like cursed objects to friends.
Yeah, that's right.
So what did that experiment teach you about how horror works differently when it arrives in your physical mailbox instead of your feed?
Oh yeah, well that was great. I mean, I love doing those. You Are Not Alone is zines. They're a money sinking project. Like there is not a single. We pay out of pocket every single time. But what's fun is like it's intimate and it's nice. And what we do, we make them in matte black little folders, taped in black duct tape, and we mail them out to people. And we have like 2 or 3 like diehard fans that have been like following up about the next issues. I think what people like is, one, people want to engage with real shit, physical media. One, I think people want physical media. They don't want to look at something on your phone. You want to hold on to it. And I do think that there's an intimate quality. Maybe it's like subconsciously or like psychologically, but like in your mailbox, in your house, it's like I'm there now. Like our scary stories are like on your coffee table. It feels like having a cursed object, which is always really, really fun headspace to be in when you're like engaging with that. But with the You Are Not Alone stories, we also do live readings with them. And that I love even more because I think a lot of people tend to forget like campfire stories and that like oral tradition of like telling a scary story is like almost more fun than reading a scary story or even writing a scary story, because like you get to like hang on every gasp and grunt and shift in the seats, and that makes everyone kind of feel a part of this theatrical communal experience. And I think writing an individual short story and just like sending it out to like a digital magazine, while very rewarding in its own right, it does lack that, you know, theatrical holding each other's hands, we're in it together experience, which I think is the whole point of horror, is like holding each other's hand, being like, we're in this together.
Yeah. Well, so you've mentioned it earlier. You teach horror and genre writing workshops, including Horror 101. And you've seen a lot of new writers trying to figure out what scares them. What common psychological blind spots do you notice when people first start writing horror seriously?
I think if I think of psychological blind spots, that's always tough. they usually build a character that is good, a strong character, but once the premise introduces itself, they always kind of bail on the psychology of the character and like follow cliched plot points, which I find frustrating. And I always try to tell them like, the character you make, it's always be like, what is this guy? How does this guy realistically feel about this? And to that extent, like, what are the tools at his disposal to combat this thing? And I always try to make them like, not necessarily write a biography about their character, because I think that's fine, but it's not something I indulge in. But you have to ask yourself like small things like, are they physically capable? Are they mentally capable? Are they financially capable? What is the community this person's in? What are the safety nets? And just, are they jealous? Ask all these like easy emotional questions. And I think the question is like, when the clown comes out of the sewer, to use it again, when the clown comes out of the sewer, this guy's headspace can't just change to fighting clown. Now it's fighting clown, but also I'm jealous of this. I want to get my ex-wife back. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do these things. And all of that kind of needs to be wrapped up and blended together into like a bright color. And then you could have a true to life kind of psychological character dealing with this type of thing. I think they get nervous because I think sometimes students think that their psychological, rich, deep character belongs in in regular literary fiction, and that they should have more of a cookie cutter person for horror shoot 'em ups. But that's where I try to shake them out of it. Like, it's actually that's the worst thing you could do. You want to give someone really real with a lot of hang-ups and a lot of problems. You want to have them face this big monster.
Do you have students that have problems with injecting too much of themselves into their, protagonist, for instance?
To be honest, I couldn't really say. I mean, I sometimes I read them and I know it's them. It's like an insert. But I think that's fine for like a first draft. I really do. Like, if that's going to get you to the headspace of that, it's not going to be such an issue. I think in fact, I probably encourage it. And what I get most afraid of is like, how do I say this? Let me rephrase myself. I want them to do that. I want them to put themselves into this book because I need them to write what they know. It's the only thing that'll give like a base to this character. And the students I've had have been very diverse students, and I'm very proud of that. They've been across the gender spectrum. They've been a wide variety of ethnicities and races and the like. And I like that. And I like having them write whatever it is they want to write about, as honestly as they want to write about it. Because only then will you get like a super specific, diverse story that's not going to be your same old, like, cookie cutter MFA college, application story. Like, for example, I went to FSU, and a lot of my stories back in my literary cohort days were like, I'm like a white passing Latin guy, right? Like, I'm Puerto Rican. My father's from El Salvador. I'm dog shit at Spanish, but but my professors just saw my last name and they wanted me to write about fucking like sofrito and my abuelo and making arroz con cantules and all this shit that I hated. I was like, and while I had experience with it and while it was real, I hated writing about it because I was like, this does not interest me at all. I don't want to write about my fucking abuelo again and again. Like, that's why Cuban is important, right? But if you have an in of something you actually care about, but you hold on to that honest thing, then you'll have a really beautiful, beautiful story. I had this one student write about zombies, and it was from the perspective of this Mexican family on the border of Texas. And it was like, their zombies only came back to them around like a certain like taco cookout. And it was incredible, and it was heartbreaking and beautiful story. And it had very, very little to do with his Mexican identity and everything to do with like food. And I was like, this is super good. And I loved all of it. But that couldn't have gotten that out of him if he didn't, lean into himself a little bit,
Yeah. One of the things I had in my head was like, have you ever had a student come to you and say like, hey, I can't help it, but I'm putting too much of myself into this character and I feel exposed. I don't like it. Cause like
Oh,
for me,
sure.
for instance, I took a writing workshop one time and that was the result of me attempting to write. And I mean, I felt like I was walking into a glass shower in the middle of a stage.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, yeah. That's tough. I've never had a student really worry about that. And I think maybe it's the language of the fiction writer. I think you should feel safe in the context of the fiction. Because even memoirs are like kind of dramatized, even like nonfiction personal essays. No, everyone will tell you, even those are kind of heightened and exaggerated, or at least dramatically restructured to be more compelling stories. And so I'm like, I never had that problem where someone felt vulnerable about it. Um, and I think that's good. Maybe they felt safe in my class, or maybe conversely they felt safe because they're like, no one will think this is me because there's like a chainsaw murderer in it too. It's like if one thing, and I always get in hot water for rekt as well because it is a personal novel. But anytime someone is like, oh well, this character is obviously so and so, or this character is based off your mother, or this character is whatever the hell, it's like, what's there to say? You don't want to lie and be like, well, no, it's actually, it's true. Everything is inspired by everything. Everything is based off of reality. You can't write in a vacuum. You can't make things up. You have to live life as an author, and you have to inspect yourself. And I would be more upset if people didn't put themselves into their writing. That said, because of that same logic, that character isn't my mother. That character is like my mother, another person's mother, a third person's mother, and like a lady I once met. You know what I mean? That person is not my brother. It's like my brother, my cousin, my friend's brother, a guy on TV, and then like another thing I read in a book. Like that's how it really is, the truth of it. But doesn't, it's not a very sexy answer. So you just have to tell people like, yeah, it's so and so,
yeah. Well, what is the life of Alex Gonzalez like outside of writing?
Boring. It's pretty quiet actually. I have a job. I work a 9 to 5. I work for a medical content company, which is fun. We do like nursing simulations for nursing students. Very, very dry work, but I get health insurance, which is nice.
Yeah.
I live with my wife and my cat like I said, in Beacon. I mostly, if I'm not on deadline, which, I have been on deadline recently for my next novel, but if I'm not on deadline, I'm mostly reading or watching movies, playing games. But yeah, most often my favorite thing to do, my wife and I, we usually go out and get a couple drinks and go see a movie or go to a restaurant and like run up a bill that's kind of obscene, and
Yes.
and that's it. And I'm quite happy with that life. It's good. I have a chair that I like to read in, and my cat sits on my lap. And then when I schedule my doctor's appointments and the like, and it's a very, very. I'm trying to learn Spanish. I'm trying to get better at Spanish because, like I said, it's dog shit. Yeah, that's it. Very, very normal stuff. I'm too busy. I have a fucking job. I can't be like skydiving.
Yes, indeed. Sounds good to me, though.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's been all right. It's been all right.
Well, Alex, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. This has been really, really great. I'm really glad you reached out. I'm really, really happy you reached out. I haven't talked about this book in a second, but it's changed my life, which is good.
Absolutely. Well, as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your readers know about?
No, nothing I'd like to plug. What do I want people to know about? No, nothing I'd like to plug. I think rekt comes out in a paperback in 2026. My next novel is slated for September 2026. But that's kind of like, under wraps. No, there's not much. You could follow me on Instagram, on Substack. I have a very transparent life. I don't even have like an author profile. My Instagram is just my life of just, bullshitting around. So it's good.
All right. Sounds good. Well, listeners at home, all links are in the description. And Alex, thank you again for joining me.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.